What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of 4th and 15 with Mel and Smooth. I am Mel, and joining me as always is Ronnie, Big Smooth Hennigan. Smooth, what's up, man?
Not a whole lot, Mel. Weekends come and weekends go. So here we are Sunday night. I'm wishing I had one more day, but I don't. Back to the grind tomorrow. What about you, man?
I feel the same way. I feel the same way. Before we get started, I've been slipping on this, and I told him I was going to keep it up. Uh, our show tonight has been brought to you in part by Box Bands. Strength is through resistance. Resistance is key. If you're a fighter, boxer, just want to get yourself back into shape, Box Bands is where it's at. Also, we got another sponsor, Smooth. I forgot to tell you about this, but we got it's real cool, and you might get a kick out of this one. Our second sponsor is bringing you this show, Uncle Rico's Quarter Mile Challenge. He could throw a football over them mountains.
Oh man,
So be on the lookout.
terrible.
All right. I couldn't help it, man. I couldn't help it.
Oh man.
All jokes
Uh,
aside, our guest for tonight is one of the nicest and coolest and down to earth people I've ever met. He's a great quarterback, former and forever Ohio State great Stanley Jackson. Stanley, welcome back to the show.
Gentlemen, thanks for having me.
Man, it's
Absolutely, man.
always a
It's always a
pleasure.
pleasure. Yeah, man.
Okay, so I want to get this out the way. I got my notes and everything, but I wanted to get this out the way because I know Smooth got a lot of questions. So, yesterday, we saw the Ohio State spring game, and I know, I can't say for a fact, but I know you are somewhere always around the horseshoe being who you are. So I don't know if you saw the game or not, but if you did, what was your take from this year's spring game?
Well, I have to be honest, I haven't finished watching it yet. Yeah, I've got fatherly duties now, so AAU basketball with my kids takes precedence. But I did get to see some of it, right? The thing we know about this program is they're loaded. They've got talent all over the place. Arguably, they probably have the best wide receiving core in the country, a lot of very young players. But there's two serious question marks about this team. Number one, who's going to be behind center? And number two, who's going to be in the backfield? And from what I gather, CJ Stroud is the man. He's the guy. He's going to be the starting quarterback. Um, he's got all the tools that you want out of a player, and I think he's probably the most athletic out of the group. Might not be the best passer, but he brings you that dual threat. And then the backfield, I don't know. A spring game, you never really know. Didn't see a lot of Master Teague. I think Master Teague is going to be a lot better. Even I was personally a little disappointed with his performance at times, but that's just because we have such a short memory that we forget that last spring Master Teague tore his Achilles tendon. That's a significant injury to come back from. Then obviously Trey Sermon arose and was pretty special through most of the year until he got hurt in the first play of the national championship game. But I think you'll see probably more running back by committee this year. I do think Master Teague, though, will emerge as the leader in the clubhouse because he has the most experience. He is a big physical back. He's still probably the fastest back there. But I think you'll see a sprinkle of those young backs every now and then to help mix it up from the backfield. So to me, those are the two things that I was looking forward to seeing.
Okay. And then my only other question with that is, did you see enough, knowing who you are and knowing who you work for, which is the Big Ten Network? And honestly, I every time I watch a Big Ten Network, you have the most unbiased opinion, even with the Buckeyes. So the burning question that I have is, do the Buckeyes still have enough to keep a stranglehold over the Big Ten?
They do. They've got more than enough. I mean, if you just look at the last 5 years of recruiting, let's shorten it. The last 3 years of recruiting, just the number of 5- and 4-star guys that have come into Ohio State, no one else is even close in the Big Ten. I think the closest maybe Penn State with 4 guys. And so from just the recruiting standpoint, it's not even close. It's not. If you look what's happening in Michigan, they got 19 guys in the transfer portal right now. And the reality is Penn State was the only other school that was close in recruiting, and they just can't keep up with Ohio State right now. So, yeah, I mean, by a mile, Ohio State is in front of everybody else. Now, that doesn't mean they can't lose to a Big Ten team. You got some really good coaches that are developing players, that are taking some 2- and 3-star players and making them into great college football players. But Ohio State definitely has a leg up right now. The one thing that really stands out, because Ohio State has always gotten more 4- and 5-star guys than the rest of the conference, but to me, recently, they've been developing these guys to elite players. Now, I think the key is real simple. Can the quarterback, a new quarterback, fill the shoes left by Justin Fields? Think about the run that Urban Meyer and Ryan Day have been on with quarterbacks. I mean, really, Urban shows up, and you get it's still the most explosive quarterback Ohio State has ever had in Braxton Miller. He's your guy for 2 years. He gets injured. You're wondering what's going to happen next. And JT Barrett only does nothing but set all the records for Ohio State football and Big Ten football. Then he's followed by a guy, Dwayne Haskins, that simply is the greatest passing quarterback Ohio State has ever had. And then Justin Fields comes in for 2 years and probably is the most complete quarterback Ohio State has ever had. So the challenge for any quarterback coming after that, seems like the shoes continue to get bigger and bigger. But that's the real question mark. Can the quarterback position live up to the last 5 or 6 quarterbacks that have been under this coaching staff?
Yeah, because those are some very, very big names that you just rattled off. And I'm curious. I saw a bit of the spring game, and from what I saw, the defense was there, which is not the biggest issue I've had. My issue was who or what will the quarterback situation be come, September? Because I was scared. I was talking to Smooth about this the other day. I was like, I don't want this to turn into another you and Joe Germain issue, because we all knew back then you were better than Jermaine, but I guess that John Cooper stigma of, well, I got to ride the hot hand, which was never the case because Joe never had it. To me, Joe never had the hot hand, but
Nope.
It is what it is. And I just feel like with the bar being set so high year after year for quarterbacks, it's gotten to the point where, are we going to see that type of situation again? And I hope not.
Well, I don't think we will. I think if you look around the country, schools and programs have been trending away from splitting time at the quarterback position. Hey, let's just go to Clemson, for instance. I mean, you think back to the last national championship they won when Kelly Bryant was a junior and he was the starter and was playing very well. And they were undefeated when he was playing. They could have easily finished the year with rotating him and a freshman and Trevor Lawrence. It's not what they did.
Mm-hmm.
They made wholesale changes at that position, went with Trevor Lawrence. I still don't agree with it. I actually think they would have won a national championship with Kelly Bryant back then. I think that kid was playing great. He ultimately transferred to Missouri, but you saw the switch right away. How about Alabama? You look at what they did with Jalen Hurts and Tua. I mean, when's the last program that decided to bench a quarterback that took their program to back-to-back national championships? Well, they did that with Tua, all right? They brought him in the second half. I actually didn't think he played great in the second half. He had made a couple of great plays, but he also made some bonehead plays. Ultimately, they prevailed. He becomes the starter the next year. And so I think the trend that we're seeing is coaches realize how important the quarterback position is. And because the quarterback carries so much burden today, and it's a different burden. All right, so you go back to the late 90s. The burden was more mental, right? Your quarterback had to get you in and out of everything. He had to make checks at the line. He had to make sure the guys were in the right position. But you ran the ball more, right? And he didn't run the ball as much. Well, you fast forward to today, where we've taken the burden of the mental side away from the quarterback. So now everybody looks to the sideline for plays. Right? We call a play, they'll get a clap, and the defensive move, and we all look to the sideline to see what the coach wants to call next, right? So we're taking the mental side so quarterbacks can just play and make decisions once the ball is snapped. But the physical side has expanded tremendously. You think of our last few quarterbacks, I mean, not only a lot of times they're our leading rusher and our leading passer. And so we're asking a lot more of them physically. And because of it, I think, coaches are getting away from this platoon because you want these guys to have a rhythm. When I really think back to some of the worst decisions I made as a quarterback at Ohio State, it's because I was thinking, this is my last possession. If I don't make this throw, I'm going to be out. and I want to play more. So you ultimately force yourself into bad decisions. And I believe coaches are getting away from that. I don't think you'll see a platoon system at Ohio State. I think right now, out of the quarterback position, CJ is, when you watch him play, he's, the most competent out there. I'm not saying he's the best, but he's the most competent. I think the freshman, I'm trying to blank on his name right now, probably throws the best ball, but I don't think he gives you the best chance to win, and he may end up being the backup. So if you have a freshman that's a backup, you have a kid that's been around for a while that has all the tools you want, you typically lean on the older kid unless he falls apart once the season starts.
Right. And one more thing that came across my screen. This is the preseason FPI. And as we all know, Ohio State is behind Iowa State. Now, I don't know if you've seen this yet, but there are 2 Big Ten schools in the top 10. Do you agree with this, or is this just something that just ESPN came across?
Well, I mean, if you're ESPN and you own the ACC and the SEC network, the only network you don't own is the Big Ten network. The Big 12 doesn't have one. You're going to make sure that you bolster the teams in your program. Is it ridiculous that some of these teams are ranked ahead of Ohio State? Of course. I mean, let's start with Clemson. Who's their quarterback? He's pretty good, but he's young, right? I mean, they brought that kid in last year. He threw for 400 yards, and they lost to Notre Dame. But is he Trevor Lawrence? I don't know. Who's their tailback? ATN was one of the best backs in the country the last 3 years. He's gone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they got some guys on the defensive end, but offensively, they've got some big shoes to fill. How about Alabama? Who's their quarterback? Who's their top wide receiver? Who's their running back? But yet they get to be ranked number 1 because they won the national championship last year. On the flip side, when you look at Ohio State, outside of the quarterback and your top running back, almost a lot of positions are coming back. So, but this is not new. This happens every year. I actually think it's good. I think it puts a chip on the shoulder of the program. I think they should feel disrespected and they can move forward. When I look at that top 10, I'm wondering why it's Penn State that's the next team, to be honest with you. I really am. I mean, Penn State had a rough year last year. They've got an issue at the quarterback position. They've got an issue at the running back position. They've lost their top linebacker. They always recruit well, but I don't know if they're the second best team in the Big Ten. And really, I'm looking out west to Wisconsin, quite frankly. I know they kind of had a rough patch the second half of the season, but they've got a young quarterback. They've got running backs. Their offensive line is always good. Defensively, they're very good. And I think there may be some prizes. I think Minnesota will be pretty good this year, honestly. And I'm curious to see Maryland. Maryland came out the blocks last year. COVID derailed them. Maryland's got a lot of talent that people aren't aware of, that they haven't seen yet. And Maryland has a coaching staff that I think can rival almost any coaching staff in the conference. Don't be surprised if Maryland comes out to be one of the top teams in the East this year.
Stanley,
really?
You make a good point, and I want to throw this in there real quick because that got me kind of like, oh, okay, cool. I'm curious. So with that, and just based off of what we saw last season, even with COVID hitting and whatnot, I want to interject and throw another team out there. What are your thoughts about this upcoming season for Indiana, seeing how well they did?
Well, the real question,
I was going with that.
Yeah, and Indiana will be very good. Coach Allen will always have their defense ready to go. But there was a significant drop-off once Michael Penix went out. The question that I have is, can he stay healthy? If you look at him throughout his career, he's been hurt. And now he had another major knee injury. Is he going to be back in time? If he's back in time and he's healthy, they're a problem. He's a problem. He's a hell of a football player.
Yeah.
And he changes them. He changes them significantly. He's got an awkward release. I'm astounded by the accuracy that he has because of his release, but he understands his receivers. He puts the ball in the right spot. He had an unbelievable second half versus Ohio State. If they can get him to be healthy, then they will be competitive again and maybe the second best team in the East because their defense was really good last year. I don't think people gave them a lot of credit, but if you look at Coach Allen's tenure at Indiana, their defense has been very good. There have been a couple of times where they've been the number 1 takeaway defense in the conference. And so now you complement that with an explosive offense. They had a good run game. They could be dangerous, but it really is about Michael Penix. If If he's not healthy, then they won't be the same. Remember, when he went out last year, they ultimately lost the bowl game. If he's in there, they absolutely win that bowl game last year. They're a top 10 team in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and that's the thing.
I agree.
And that's why I wanted to get your thoughts on that, because when I was looking at that list, in my opinion, like you said, if he's back, I think that's the second team in the Big Ten right there. If he's back. Now, if he's not, that changes the whole game, like you said, because offensively, that explosion they had last season was just crazy to see. And I didn't really see that coming like that. And like you said, they made a good run and they had a good game against Ohio State. And I was just looking like, where is this team like coming from? Like, what is this? Like, no one even knew what was going on at that time. And when that happened, that was the only other team that I felt last year that truly rivaled what Ohio State was trying to do, but they're on the same side of the conference. So by default, that's it. They lost that game. That's it. They're not going to be in the Big Ten championship. So I don't know, man. That list, it made me laugh too. And me being a Georgia fan, they ain't top 10 this year. I can tell you that. They might be 15.
No, who's their
Let's keep it
quarterback?
real.
Right, who's their quarterback? They've got to replace running backs.
They got
too.
JT. Yeah, JT Daniels came back. He's the clear starter right now. They had a spring game this past weekend.
He's not.
They got the five.
Does he impress
They
you?
got it's hard to say because they don't have the strength at receiver is their problem. So it's like, is it on him? Is it on them? Do they have the right chemistry with what they do have to work with? Because the same issue came up when they put their 5-star recruit in there to play a little bit, Brock Vandegrift.
Right.
And he's clearly not going to start next season. But JT, if he has the right tools, he can get the ball there. But the receiving core has been real shaky. Pickens being back, but then he got hurt in practice this year. We don't know if he's going to be back by the fall. And then all the other guys and Mookie Blaylock's son and all that. It's like, are they going to have the guys they need to play? I don't know. It's going to be real heavy on like the tight ends for the most part and the running game once again. The defense is pretty much all back except for LeConte. Because, for him, he was a senior. Everybody else that pretty much wasn't a senior actually decided to come back. And Zamir White looks great too. But, yeah, it's just JT Daniels right now is their starting quarterback. Zamir's going to be starting running back. And out of that, it's going to be a lot of that workload on those two on the offensive side. But I can tell you right now, they're not a top 10 at all. 15 I'd give them maybe, but not a top 10. I saw it, I was like, they don't have it on the outside or anything else to be able to really separate themselves from the other teams that are going to get you in the title. So this year, it's pretty much going to be the same way. Lucky to see maybe 8 or 9.
But remember, though, who's going to – if you think about what always happens in the rankings, they're always going to have SEC teams ranked really high. And if Alabama takes a step back, which I expect that they will, right, due to all they've lost, who else is in the SEC? Hey, we found out that Florida was fool's gold. Their best receiver is now gone. There's no other team there that right now has, as watching them last year, that you could say they're the clear favorite for the conference. That's why Alabama's ranked so high, even though they've lost all that they've had. So if defensively, if they could be stout defensively, then they'll have a shot. But on a side note, your Coach Smart, or not Smart, who's the Georgia coach? I forget his name. It is Smart, right? Smart. Don't you have to be kicking yourself because you didn't have enough gumption to say, you know what, Justin Fields, you are the best quarterback on campus. You are going to be my starter the way Nick Saban did. And so talk about losing out on a generational player. But I think Georgia has a shot. Let's be honest. It is so early right now. So many things are going to happen. I think when you see Iowa State there, they stand out because historically they're not a team that's in the top 10. But they were a really good football team last year. They're a well-coached team.
Some good wins.
And they've got some pieces. The challenge with the Big 12 is they just don't play defense. So in a playoff scenario, you see Iowa State competing with the other 4 conferences. Probably not. No Big 12 team has really went into the playoff and really played well as of yet. Oklahoma sure hasn't figured it out. And it's really because defensively they haven't figured it out. And typically the top conferences or the top teams are the ones that figure it out on the defensive end. And that's where Clemson may be scary this year. Defensively, they still have a lot of pieces. They had the kid that was a freshman last year. I don't know if you guys remember him, the big white kid. This dude was destroying everybody in high school. He looked like he should have been in the NFL when he was in high school. He was a freshman last year. So I'm expecting him to have a pretty big season, and they may have some pieces, but right now, whenever they come out with these top tens, I don't know where they're getting their information from because no team has played. I really think we should be pulling back all these ratings. Now, don't get me wrong. I know why they do it. They do it for television ratings because now you can have two top 10 teams play early in the season. You're going to get good ratings. But it really should be more like the playoff scenario. We should be waiting to week 6 before we put out any rankings for these teams.
I like that idea.
I agree.
And
agree.
something else and you made a good point, Stanley, about the lack of defense. And I know you said something too as well, Ramil, about the Big 12 not really playing D, and that's not what they were known for. And just seeing some of these teams, how they've emerged in the last few years with the national titles and the kind of offenses they were running were ones that were very familiar to Big 12 play. And you put that in the hands of like a different team and the talent that they have in some of the other conferences and see what they do on the offensive side is way more explosive. Now, something that Nick Saban said, because this happened after the Georgia game that they had, they come in, obviously they had the better offense. And then Georgia at the time had a better defense. But the thing is, like, if you can't score and put those points up, the D will keep you in. But then Saban was saying, like, for him, because of the points that Alabama gave up last year, more significantly, we talked about a few weeks ago, that 52-48 with them against Florida. And it's like, okay, at this point, he was like, look, I'm more concerned about getting that ball out there, putting that score up. If I can consistently have a team that scores 40 or more points a game, I'm just more so concerned about outscoring you at this point. And that's kind of what his focus was, or the difference that he said about between him and like Saban. No, sorry, about Smart, excuse me. Is like Smart is so good defensively. On that offensive side, I haven't seen that transition yet. I'm waiting on it, hoping it happens at some point. But like right now, I don't know, man. I just feel like it's evolving the way football is now. That offense is just so key.
Well, that's why Nick Saban is probably the greatest college football coach ever. Most of these guys are pretty rigid. Once they find something that works, they stick with it. As great as Urban Meyer was, his Achilles heel was this Q run nonsense that he loved. He loved the quarterback run. And all it did was bang up his quarterbacks, right? Because everybody wasn't Tim Tebow, 240 pounds, that could play 15 games. At the end of every season, J.T. Barrett was always, a fraction of himself because of all the hits that he took throughout the year. But Urban believed in it, and he stuck with it. You go back to that Clemson loss with Braxton Miller, when instead of handing it off to Carlos Hyde, he's giving it to Braxton Miller to run the last play. He also gave it to Braxton Miller to run the last play against Michigan State, right? Because he believed that. So you got to give Nick Saban some credit, because if you go back just 5 years ago, Nick Saban is talking about play great defense and pound the football. As a matter of fact, you go back to the national championship game that he lost, or the national championship playoff that he lost against Ohio State. There's the thought that a lot of people have that if he run Derrick Henry a little more, maybe they win that football game. And that's how he won a lot of games for years. Outstanding run game and play unbelievable defense. Well, now the last few years, since Mike Locksley got there, then obviously it's gone on to Maryland, and then they bring in I forget the guy's name, who's the head coach now, Sarkisian. They're throwing it all over the place. Nick was up in arms about that 5 years ago. Who's the other offense coordinator that he had that wanted to throw it all over the place? He's the head coach at
Kiffin.
Kiffin, right? Kiffin.
Yep, Lane Kiffin.
He didn't want him to do it, but now I think he realizes that the college game is changing, and sometimes you can win on offense. This is something that would have never happened 50 years ago. Defense won championships then, but it was clear that it was Ohio State's inability to stop the passing game that gave up that national championship. And you got to tip your hat to Nick Saban making that adjustment this late in his career and not being a stickler for what has always worked for him. The question is, how do you move forward? All those guys, all those really good receivers are now moving on. How do they move forward with a new quarterback and losing their top running back? That's going to be key for them.
True. Very true.
All right, Smooth, you said you had some questions that you had for Stanley, and
yes,
I'm interested to hear these. So I'm going to let you take over on this one.
All right, so we're still in NCAA, right? So there's a report that came out a few days ago Okay, and they're talking about the NCAA Division I Council adopting a measure that will allow athletes in all sports to transfer once without sitting a season, okay, which was announced this past Thursday. Now they're going to meet again the 28th of April just to make sure that that measure will become an actual rule for a one-time opportunity. So, first of all, what are your thoughts on what that does for NCAA football overall? What do you think that does now, based off of some of the teams that we talked about and the different things that we're seeing right now in the transfer portal?
Well, part of me says too little, too late. That's a part of me. Another part says it's a great move because it's already happening. There are already a ton of kids transferring, and they're allowing these kids to play right away for some obscure reasons. And I think in the long run, they're probably avoiding a lawsuit, right? Because when you have the same governing body that says to Justin Fields, oh, you can absolutely play right away, and then they tell another kid you can't, and there's no real defining reason as to why one can and the other can't, then I think they had to move in this direction. I think they're being forced to move here. I do believe it's a good move. I think they should probably add an academic standard to it. As long as you're in academic good standing, and maybe a minimum 3.0, you get that one transfer. Here's why I like it, is because when you're being recruited, it's an overwhelming process. Coaches are coming at you, family, friends, everybody's telling you what the best scenario is. A lot of these kids have never had anybody ever step foot on college campus, and none of them never really did their research. And so you get there and you realize it's not a fit for you. And maybe it's the football that's not a fit for you. Maybe it's the academics. Maybe it's just the social life. It's not a fit for you. You were 17 and 18 years old when you made a decision that can transform or hurt the rest of your life. You should be able to fix it if you can. So that's why I like it. I'm actually hoping it trickles down to high school, right? You shouldn't be forced to stay in a high school just because you live in that district, even though you got some terrible high school coach that doesn't, that wants to still run the wing T and you're a wide receiver. So I hope it trickles down to that level at some point. So I do believe it is a step in the right direction by the NC2A. I think they're going to be looking at a lawsuit soon with the way it's set up currently. And I like what's happening. Now, I can't say I like what's happening in the basketball portal right now. It's like the Wild Wild West. I don't understand a 3-year starter all of a sudden transferring. I don't understand a 2-year starter, leading scorer, all of a sudden transferring. I don't get that. I think a lot of these kids are watching what's happening in the NC2A. They realize what's been happening on the AAU market, where they're jumping around, playing for a bunch of different teams. And now that's how they're trying to get to a winning program at the college level. I don't think this should be about getting to a winning program. It should be about getting to a program that fits you, that allows you to go out there and maximize your potential. So if you're already the leading scorer at some school and you're starting, I wouldn't allow that guy to transfer. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think that is good for college basketball or football, because, we're going to continue to see this portal grow and grow the way you see free agency and these NBA players going all over the place. I don't know if you have, wait till you get, you have kids playing AAU basketball. You see these kids jump from program to program just to be on a winner. And I think that could be problematic, but with every decision we make in life, there's the unintended consequences, and I think that's the unintended consequences of the transfer portal.
Makes sense. And with that, do you feel that it would have had the same type of impact when you were playing? Or do you feel like guys were just more loyal back then? Because I know for us personally, from what we've done and what we've experienced at football, we were very loyal. It was different. So do you feel like that's the same thing that would have happened? Yeah, to a fault, right. Do you feel like that's what would happen with, the guys that you played with, Stanley, or some of the guys that you knew, or just in general from what you saw as a player from your perspective?
No, I do believe you would have seen more transfers back then. Because it was so difficult to do, I think it did deter a handful of players. It wouldn't be like it is now, though. We were a different generation. We were built different. You were built to compete. I always knew that I would start at Ohio State at some point. And I would have went out swinging if it wouldn't have happened. I think back to, I'm getting old now, so I drew a blank on all these names. So many quarterbacks go through. But we had the one 5-star quarterback to come through Ohio State, never played it down. but he stuck it out,
Wow.
got his degree. Is now working, doing well. Loved Ohio State. He could have transferred easy. He's a very highly talented quarterback, and he didn't leave. So there are still some kids that don't leave, but this definitely has made it easier. And so I think I'd be disingenuous if I didn't say there would have been an uptick in transfers back in our day. I don't think to this extent. What we're seeing right now in basketball is a little different, in my opinion. And I don't know if we're going to get this in football. But again, back to my point I just made, when you have guys that are starting and leading scorers, a Power 5 school, why is that kid transferring? If your school isn't good enough and you're a starter and a leading scorer, maybe it's your fault.
True.
Right? So maybe you should get better to help your team go on.
I got nothing on that one.
Right?
I got nothing on that one.
Yeah. Only one quarterback is to play. So Joe Burrow is the perfect example, right? I mean, look, Dwayne Haskins came in, he took his lunch. What was Joe to do? Sit there and not play? No, dude took his talents down to LSU, won a national championship, first round, the number 1 overall pick. He's a perfect example of why this needs to be in place, why we need to let kids go.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, even though our parents might think we're the best thing since sliced bread, when you get on campus, there might be somebody better than you. And you should be able to go to another program and, live out your dream and get a chance to play.
Yeah. No, I like your points, man, because, trying to, like you said, play for 2 or 3 years, and then all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I see this team over here about to get a title, so I'm about to jump over here real quick and try to, build my stock if I even get to play. You know what I'm saying? Because you can jump over there, but do you know if you're going to play or not? I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, because if you're not playing where you are currently, or let's say you are, and to your point, even in basketball, if you're a starter and you're the leading scorer and then you go to some other school that's real hype or whatever, and then you barely getting PT just so you can get a ring, like, it ain't worth it. You know what I'm saying? Right. And on top of that, too, I like the idea you gave about Joe Burrow because he's a prime example, like you said, of someone that benefits from that. And then you think about, okay, are there any other top recruits who would be, riding the bench or wouldn't get that chance to play and be able to shine somewhere else and take that program to the next level? So it's exciting for me. I can't wait to see, what that does. But then I'm also curious to see how it may shake up some of the different conferences as well. Some talent coming from some of the ones that may not be getting their shine, or maybe a situation where, Mel, I know me and you talked about, HBCU teams, and getting a chance to transfer and stuff like that. What does that do for them? Because maybe some guys will say, you know what, let's go over here and do something. Right. You know what I mean?
Well, remember, you could always go down to the HBCU without sitting out. Right, because there were one dub play, and so you go down there. The question is now, will some of those guys jump up? And now you give props to my guy, Duke, Eddie George, just getting hired at Tennessee State. Obviously, Deion Sanders. So there's a movement now in HBCUs. The question is, will the money move with them? Because let's be honest about this. Long term, in order to get all the top recruits, you got to have better facilities. You have to be on television. Your parents have to be able to watch you play across the country. And if they can figure that out, then I do believe they'll have an opportunity to do something special. Now, look, Eddie, I don't know how good a coach he is, but he's smart. All right. So he hires Coach Fisher, NFL guy to run his defense. Then he hires Hugh Jackson, who Hugh did a horrible job as a head coach in Cleveland. Horrible. But as an offensive coordinator, and quarterback coach, he has been stellar. And so now you bring 2 NFL guys in to coach your offense and defensive players. So now if you're a kid that wants to play in the NFL, okay, if you're not going to go to Ohio State or Alabama, maybe the next best place is Tennessee State because they got 2 coaches that can get me ready. And so it was a real smart move out of Eddie George. He just hired Pepe Pearson, former running back at Ohio State. He was at Marshall. So he's really loading up this staff. Said they're going after Rod Wilson. So they're loading up the staff with guys who have played Woodson at a high level, who played in the NFL and could help bring kids on campus. Now they got to do is got to clean up campus. I haven't seen their campus. I have been on some HBCUs. My brother went to Bethune-Cookman. Those campuses as they sit today, most of them can't compete with the experience that you're going to get at a top 5 program. Now, they can compete with some of the group of 5 schools, though. So this is an interesting experiment that's happening with the HBCUs. I'm curious to see how this pans out. And yeah, I think the transfer thing does play into that, because now kids might decide to go ahead and transfer down and play and see if they have an opportunity to go on to the next level. Because at the end of the day, and I don't agree with this, but Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, USC, when they were good, Penn State, all the top schools recruit towards the NFL, even though they know 99% of the players are not going to go to the NFL. Even though they have way more players in their programs going than other programs, they recruit kids to say, we can get you to the league, even though they're lying, right? Because most of their players are not going to the NFL. And so that's the challenge with the HBCUs. Can you compete with that? And I think if you're hiring a guy like Deion Sanders and Eddie George, you might be able to compete with that narrative.
You know what? I'm going to stop right there for a split second, because I'm so glad this brought up, because this was going to tie into my part of the conversation.
Yeah, man, we're rolling, man.
So with that being said, here's a list. I caught this on the Grambling State game 2 weeks ago. Here's a list of Hall of Fame players who came from HBCUs. Let me see. Is it coming up? There we go. There we go. All right, stop playing. All right. Mel Blount, Willie Brown, Lynn Barney, Aeneas Williams, and Everson Walls. These are the best quarterbacks in HBCU history, according to ESPN's. I can't. His name is skipping me right now, but he came up with this list. And for those watching, this is the list of every Hall of Fame quarterback, defensive back that has come through at HBCU, and it's mostly Jackson. It's mostly Southern and Grambling State, but this just goes to show you that it is possible. You can make the NFL and the Hall of Fame, and 2 of these corners, 3 of them actually, that I know of, have played in the Super Bowl. That being Williams with St. Louis, Willie Brown, rest in peace, and Mel Blount. So it's possible.
If you expand your list to other positions, it gets even broader. I mean, Jerry Rice. Let's start with Jerry Rice. I mean, Larry Little. I mean, the list goes on and on about guys who have, played at smaller schools or HBCUs that have had the opportunity to play at the next level. They will find you if you're talented enough. There's no question about that. And so I don't think that's the issue for the really good guys. Honestly, I don't. Especially in basketball, right? I mean, if you're going to be a one-and-done guy, you can go anywhere. Unless you get injured, you're going to go. The question that I have to ask for the HBCUs, and again, my brother went to an HBCU, is do you have the resources so that the other aspects of your campus experience can compare with the big schools? And it's an unfair question, because right now they don't, because they don't have those resources. But can you get there, right? Because remember, we live on campus too. So there's some things at HBCU that are far better than any historically white college. There is. But a lot of things are lacking as an athlete. The weight room, the meal plan, your opportunity to be around multiple NFL guys. The one thing about Columbus, Ohio that stands out, why every kid that doesn't get offered by Ohio State doesn't come, always baffles me. And I say this to parents, especially local kids. So you tell me where you want your kid to live once they're done. You think they're going to live in Happy Valley? You think they're going to live in Ann Arbor? No. But Columbus is a major metropolitan with opportunities galore to work, to start your own business, to do good things. They've got great schools. Minnesota, honestly, has a great argument for that. It's a big city that it's located in now. It's freezing more than half the year, but at least there's opportunities to work. And I express that with kids once they're going off to college. I say, look, make sure you pick a place that, number one, you can live for the rest of your life. Now, you might go back home, but you might not. And I think that's some of the challenges that some of the HBCUs will have. Howard doesn't have that, though. Right? I mean, there's some schools in Atlanta There's some great places that you can go that not only can you have a great campus experience, but once you're done, there's a great opportunity in that community to take care of your family.
Amen. Amen. And speaking of HBCUs, because that was where I was going with this talk on my end, the Bayou Classic happened yesterday. Now, I get it. It's a lackluster Bayou Classic. It's in Shreveport at the Independence Bowl. I get all of that, but I was happy to see it, even though my team was on the losing end, getting throttled 49-7 by Southern. They were off with Grambling. Let's just call it what it is. Grambling was off 3 weeks. This was a bad spring for them to begin with, especially in the game against Jackson State, thinking that they were going to win with the game-winning drive, and they end up fumbling. But since we are having this talk and the HBCU part of it is very prevalent, I have to ask from your standpoint, since you said your brother went to Bethune-Cookman, where do you see HBCU football going with the moves that they're making as far as coaches are concerned, with Dion at Jackson State, with Eddie at Tennessee State? Where do you see this going?
Well, those aren't the only moves that are happening. The MEAC may go away real soon here, right?
Really?
Florida A&M and Bethune-Cookman have already jumped to the SWAC. There's a move for right now. There's other schools that are talking about dropping out of the MEAC as well. I forgot who it was that didn't even go to a black conference. And so there's moves happening that way too. Ultimately, now this may be blasphemous. There are a lot of people that are probably going to cuss me out if I say this. Ultimately, I do believe that you have to get some of the better programs to work their way into Division I conferences, whether it's the Group of Five or it's the Power Five. Right? In order to really compete on par with those teams, you got to play against them. And the only way to do that is to get into the conference. So at some point, if they can recruit with some of these bigger schools, then I think one of these schools is going to have to make the move. Now, I don't know who it is. Could you imagine if Grambling decided, to join the MAC or the AAC? What that would mean for historically black colleges? That would be significant because, here it is right away. You tie into funding. You tie right into funding. If Central State can somehow figure out how to get into the Big Ten, you know how much funding that is for Central State? The Big Ten Network alone cuts a check every year for about $60 million to every Big Ten school.
Really? Wow. Yeah. I did not know that.
So if you can figure out how to get into, one of these conferences, it could be significant. Or the next best thing is you got these guys now who have been around a lot of money, who have been around these owners. What if, Dion goes to Jerry Jones and says, look, Jerry, I need you to get your oil people to start writing some checks. Start building up the facilities to make sure we get on television so we can then be on par with those other schools. So I'm curious to see what happens in the next few years. I love the move. I think it makes perfect sense. I've got a nephew that's coming out now. We're talking to Eddie at Tennessee State about my nephew going down there to play quarterback. I just think it's a good thing. Anytime any student athlete gets an opportunity to play at the next level, it's great. And sometimes to be around people that are going to care for you, it's even better, quite frankly. So I'm curious to see how it pans out. They've got to be successful, though, right? They've got to win games. And then at some point, I guarantee you right now, Dion continues to recruit the way he is. You're going to see him at least start to schedule some of these big boys. And if they're competitive, that's going to change the landscape. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, Florida A&M came and played Ohio State. You guys remember that?
Yeah.
It was awful. Yep. It was awful. That was one of that was one of the worst FAMU teams I have ever seen. And again, my brother played at Bethune-Cookman. The rival was FAMU. They played in the Big Sombrero every year. I went down there. I was down there at Black College Beach Week. I almost signed with Bethune-Cookman because of Black College Beach Week. The representation that FAMU sent to the Horseshoe was pitiful. Pitiful. You can't get beat like that. You can't let that team score 80 points on you and you not be able to score at all. The one thing I remember being on campus at the HBCUs back in the early 90s, when I really thought they were really good schools, was the skill positions. Now, maybe they couldn't compete in the trenches, but they always had great skill players.
Mhm.
I watched HBCU football recently. It's not the same right now. So I'm glad they're raising the bar for coaches. So maybe they could get back to getting like some of those guys that you just listed to commit back to these schools to raise that bar again.
Yeah, because we talked about this plenty of times, and I felt
Mm-hmm.
like when the transfer portal started, I was so bent on expressing myself. Like, don't be surprised if you see some of these, 3, 4, and 5-star recruits start to transfer now that Dion is at Jackson and now that Eddie's down at Tennessee State. Don't be surprised if they start to make that move down there, and that could change a lot. A lot of people don't agree with it, but with especially with the scheduling coming up, uh, LSU is hosting Grambling and Southern in back-to-back seasons, if I'm not mistaken. And then this year, Grambling and Tennessee State, which is going to be Eddie's first coaching debut, is up in Canton. So why would you not think that this would be a possibility? And a lot of people are still stuck in this mindset that, oh man, you just talking that. No, look at the landscape. I mean, kids are transferring left and right just because either they're not playing or a coach picked another player over them. So, I feel like it's only beneficial to these HBCUs that this would happen. And I think with Dion and Eddie, respectively, being where they are and being who they are, I think this brings a lot of momentum down south and puts the HBCU community in a position to where this might be a real possibility.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier. I think their opportunity is in the transfer portal. I still don't think they'll be able to compete recruiting kids out of high school, right? Not yet. There's got to be a lot of changes first because this is a different group of kids. This group has grown up with this, right? And you can be a celebrity overnight with this. And they're on videos and they're on TikTok so they want to be celebrities. So what's the easiest way to be a celebrity right now? It's to go. Is it to go to HBCU or is it to go to Ohio State? Is it to go to Alabama? Think about Ohio State, Alabama, and Clemson and the stronghold that they have on recruiting right now. How is that possible?
Man.
Back in our day, you would say, wait a second here. I'm not afraid of competing, but the last 3 years, they just took the last 3 running backs, the number 1 running backs in the country. Why would I go there to be the 4th? I'm going to go over here to this school that has no top running backs in the country. Make my opportunity greater. No, now all these kids want to do, they want to play on the power teams. They want to play on the most popular teams to be celebrities. So that's going to be a challenge from a direct recruiting. But as you said, the disgruntled kid that's not happy, then yeah, there's some opportunity there. I was having a conversation with Ryan Day about what this new transfer era does to college coaches in general, any sport, is once you got on campus back in the day, you were done. They knew you were stuck. It's so hard to transfer. You got to sit out. If you transfer to a Big Ten school, you can't get money. It was so many rules around it. So 9 times out of 10, kids weren't going anywhere. So they could care less. They had you. You're on campus. Now they can mistreat you. Today, they've got to continue to recruit you. They've got to recruit you all the way through 4 years. You become a starter, they're leading scorer in basketball, they still have to recruit you. They're starting quarterback, they still have to recruit you. And so that has changed significantly. And that's where, a guy like Eddie and Dion or whoever's next can, find these kids in the transfer portal and talk them into coming to their school. Because one thing that Dion does well, he already has, 3 or 4 4-star guys, is he can talk you into something. He can talk you into something. And it's going to be fascinating to see what he does. I know a lot of the coaches, that are beating him now are talking smack. Well, he just got there. This is not his football team. His football team in the next 3 years is when we'll determine what he did a good job in recruiting or not. And I'm going to be honest with you. I hate the fact that they're playing football right now. I think it's a mistake.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They should have played in the fall with everybody else. How you have 3/4 of the country playing and just a small portion of schools aren't playing. Everybody else got through football. So now what you're telling me, player safety, in one answer, you're saying we didn't play because of player safety. But now we're going to play the game of football all the way through the spring and then turn around in a month and a half later and play again. How is that player safety?
Man.
Linemen need time to recover. Linemen bang. They need time to recover. And now, like even the MAC is playing some games. It's just crazy to me that they're playing football games right now. Then they're going to want these kids to be back in camp at the start of August. When did their bodies get to recover? It's nothing to do with player safety.
And you're right. You're right on that one because I'm happy to see football, but at the same time, you gotta wonder, like, is this a way, is this really the way the NCAA wants this, or whatever the respective conferences wanted it, or was this a way to just bring in more money through the spring, even with limited attendance? Don't get me wrong. The fact that Jackson State's been on ESPN more times than they've ever been in the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years is great. But at what cost?
Well, here's what my plan would be. If I was running the HBCU conferences, we would have a conference go on and say, why don't we permanently move our season to the spring?
Really?
Well, why do we want to compete? Why do we want to compete with all the other football? There's always been these leagues that have tried to start up at the pro level in the spring, right? They always fizzle because of finances. Well, if you're smaller conferences or you're the HBCU and you're not competing for a national championship anyway, you're never going to be invited to those four. Why wouldn't you move permanently to the spring? You just said it. Jackson State has been on ESPN more than they've ever had. That's not because just Deion is there. If this was college football season, they wouldn't be on there as much. There would be highlights of them, but they wouldn't show their games. If they were to move next season to the spring again, they'd have the same exposure. Not only that, you would help your players. So I'm a junior, okay? And I'm sure this has happened in one of these schools. And I just tore my ACL last week. What happens to my senior year?
Done.
How can I get back for that year? Now, I'll probably get this year back with a medical, but you only get 1 year in a medical. Can I get back for that next year? No, I can't. I mean, you can't. Not when it starts in August. So somebody, smarter than me should really be considering whether it makes sense for the HBCUs to permanently switch when they play football. Who says football has to be played in the fall? If you want to build this country loves football, loves it. That's why you're tuning in to watch football. If they can improve their product and be exclusive, right? College basketball is over right now. The only thing you got is NBA and hockey and baseball. Nobody's watching hockey and baseball like that. If you knew you could watch football right every year, this spring league was going to come back, and it was college football players, not some offshoot of a pro league, then more people would watch, and they could dominate that time slot and make money from TV revenue.
Man, just schooled the whole audience. You just schooled the whole audience.
Because we didn't even think of that. I'll be honest. We was talking about it, and we're like, okay, cool. The exposure's there. It's spring. Because we were excited that we even got a chance to watch football in the spring. Because usually this time of year, you're gearing up for, like you said, baseball, NBA, hockey, maybe a little bit of golf or whatever, but you're pretty much waiting for football to come back, whether it's collegiate or pro. And to have something like that in the spring, man, yeah, I'm all for it. So that'd be cool to see.
And you know what? And I think that would help with recruiting as well, too, now that you mentioned that. Because who do you have to compete with? Like, you could tell these kids on signing day, look, you don't have to go to Ohio State. You can, come right in and play in the spring, beat everybody to the punch, and you're on ESPN, Fox Sports Net, whatever the case may be. That's a hell of an idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
Now,
I figure with the draft coming up, what that would look like.
Yeah. But you know what? I don't even think the draft would matter at that point because
your
the
seniors are
supplemental
done.
draft. Right.
Well, your seniors are done. So your seniors from last year will be in this draft, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because you run your season all the way through past the draft. And when those dudes are done, now they're training for this. They'll jump on the bandwagon to train for that draft coming up after the season. That's all you have to do.
And think about this though.
But,
Ain't
or
no
I'm
cold
sorry,
weather games in the South.
right. There's not. Yet,
No
it
cold
might
weather
get
games.
a little warm. Might get a little warm because right now they're playing an abbreviated season, right? They're playing what, 5 or 6 games?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
you start in March and go through June. You expand, it might get a little hot, but there's nothing to say that you can't get drafted while you're playing football, by the way, either.
True.
Right.
So if you're out there, lighting it up, and an NFL team wants to draft you until you finish your season, they could still draft you.
Man, that's a hell of a concept right there. We just
Mm-hmm.
HBCUs. I hope y'all watching. I might have to send this out to some people. Um, Now, because we had showed the Bayou Classic, I got off topic, but uh, I had to bring this up, even though, like I said, Grambling State got throttled. But this just warmed my heart to see this because somebody had put this up like right after the Bayou Classic had ended, and for those that are watching, for those that are gonna watch, I don't think you understand how important this man and coaches like Ace Munford and Connell Maynor and even Prime Time are important to HBCU football, especially Eddie Robinson. Like Eddie and Eddie Ace, and now to a degree, Connell Maynor and Dion have put the HBCUs back on the map and put a lot of notice back into HBCU football. And I don't know if you saw a lot of HBCU games this year, but these games have been very entertaining. You know, so with that concept and with the hirings of these coaches, it begs this question to me, from me to you, Stanley. When are we going to see you at a HBCU?
Coaching? Nah.
Yes.
No, I missed that opportunity. I'm too old for that. Now, coaching is something you got to get into young. Now, look, if I had a Heisman Trophy, right? If I played in the NFL for 10 years, maybe I could figure out how to finagle a job like Eddie. But most guys, it takes, you got to be a grunt. I got a wife and 4 kids. I can't afford to be a grunt right now. I got to get these dudes through college.
Mm-hmm.
However, having said that, maybe one of my boys will decide to go to HBCU, or my nephew. You'll see me on the sideline watching a game or two. But no, I would love to be a coach. It's just that window has passed me by, honestly. But I will say this: I had an opportunity to play in the first ever Eddie Robinson Classic, and it was in the
Really?
Horseshoe. It was. They don't play that game anymore, but it was back when they played classic games. And it was in the Horseshoe against Wyoming. It's one of my career best games, actually. I was player of the game that game. So that always was kind of a special moment, to be honest with you. I mean, because he doesn't get the recognition he deserves. They throw all bunch of coaches' names when they talk about the greatest ever. Obviously Nick Saban deserves to be in there. Joe Paterno used to be in that category, but there's no question or no doubt about it in my mind that Eddie Robinson should always be in the conversation for the greatest college football coach of all time.
Of course. Of course. You're the first man to pass Bear Bryant in victories. You've won 9 national championships, 17 conference championships, influenced a generation of players. Like, how do you not? I think, and we're gonna have this conversation later on in the later show, but I did want to throw this out there. But what is the criteria for these Hall of Fames to vote these coaches and players in? Like, shouldn't the criteria be more than just wins, losses, and championships? And when it comes to Eddie Robinson, I feel just like how I feel about seeing you as a player at Ohio State. I feel like the criteria for the greatest should be, what was your impact on the sport? Like, you may not believe it, but your impact at Ohio State was big. A lot of people, would argue, but as a kid and as a player watching you and playing against you, I saw the impact. Like, you were able to thread the needle. You were able to take off and run when you needed to. Eddie Robinson coached so many players to the NFL, and one of them who just happened to set the bar even higher, and Doug Williams when he started the Super Bowl. Like, how do you ignore that? I feel like that should be a criteria that needs to be examined a little further.
Well, I mean, that'd be too much like right, right? If we begin to add some real tangible criteria to the discussion, then you would eliminate some people real fast that they don't want to be eliminated. And you would elevate some people real fast that they don't want to be elevated at the same time. And so
it's just
now Eddie Robinson,
that's just tough shit to me.
Right. I mean, he is in the Hall of Fame. I think most, football scholars do acknowledge him as being one of the greatest, but that's not enough for me. He should be acknowledged as being in the argument for being the greatest. I mean, what he did with limited resources was significant.
Right.
And I think you're right. I mean, look, at the end of the day, the good college football coaches always have an impact on lives. I always think that should be a stat. Like, okay, you want to get in the Hall of Fame. How many guys that played for you have jobs and are paying taxes? How many jobs, how many guys are dead? How many went to jail? How many didn't graduate? Track all that stuff. But, if they tracked all that, I mean, half of these so-called great coaches would be terrible. That's even at the high school level. I've got an issue at the high school level.
Right.
I'm here in Westerville, and I'm looking at some of these high schools, and I'm saying, well, who's going to college? Where are they? Westerville Central had 35 seniors. They got like 6 kids starting to go to college. How is that possible?
Wow.
How is that possible? And that's kind of where it starts. But it's not just here in Westerville. It's all over the place. And, if you start to hold coaches to that criteria, man, half of these dudes you have to kick out the Hall of Fame.
Man. Sad but true. Sad but true. All right. Before we wrap it up with you, I came across this list. I don't know who made this list. I don't know what they were smoking when they made this list, but most exciting college football players all time.
What?
Is it just 5 of them? I only see. Okay.
Don't shoot the messenger. Don't shoot the messenger. Reggie Bush, Tavon Austin.
Mike Vick is number 9.
Right.
Who's number 10? I can't see number 10. Who's number 10?
Number 10 was let me move the ticker. Number 10 was
Jabril Peppers.
Are you kidding me? Jabril's my guy. He's a Jersey kid. He's not.
Don't shoot the messenger.
When was he exciting?
Oh, man.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Some of those guys deserve to be on that list. That list is trash, though. That list is awful. Where's Barry Sanders?
Man,
where's Deion
That's what
Sanders?
I'm saying.
Where's Deion Sanders? Where's O.J. Simpson?
Better yet, where are most of the guys that you played with?
I mean, where's Orlando
Pace? Sean Springs? Where's D. Miller? Where's Pepe? Michael Wiley? That half of the Buckeyes team in the 90s could have been on this list.
Put that list back up again. Let's see it again. Put the list back up. Okay, Reggie Bush belongs on the list. Tavon Austin, get him out of here. Saquon Barkley.
I say get him out of here just because he's from Penn State.
That's a tough one. Christian McCaffrey belongs on the list. That dude was electric. He set the single season all-purpose yards. He's pretty good. Johnny Manziel, get him out of here. Lamar Jackson belongs on the list. Braxton Miller. That's a tough one for me. He's a Buckeye, but he only played 2 years and got hurt. But he was pretty electric when he was out there. Peter Ward was never explosive or electric. Get him out of here. He shouldn't be on the list. Michael Vick should be number 1. Jabril Peppers should be out of there. If you don't have Barry Sanders on this list, you shouldn't even have a list. If Barry's not on here, you don't have a list. That's ridiculous.
And it was funny because I remember watching A Football Life with Barry Sanders. It was the Barry Sanders episode, and they interviewed Barry Switzer, who was a coach at Oklahoma at the time. And they said, because he was right behind Thurman Thomas, and he said, whatever you do, he said, I remember telling my defensive coordinator, whatever you do, keep Thurman Thomas in the game because I promise you, you do not want the guy behind him to get in the game. And the guy that was behind him was Barry Sanders. So that should show you.
Sanders.
That should show
you. Was a problem too, though.
Exactly.
Thurman was a problem. But, that's an era where you had to wait. Even though you were better, you had to wait your turn. That was that era.
Right. But that still goes to show you if a great college coach like Barry Switzer has to tell his defensive coordinator, do not let Barry Sanders get in the game because that's going to be worse for you. That should show you where his electricity and his explosiveness is in the world of college football.
Yeah, I'm gonna Google this because Google is a wonderful thing. Because a lot of times people are caught in the moment. They're just caught in today. They don't realize that there have been people better than you. And this was an era where every defense was geared to stop the run. Not like today. Yeah. Today, the defense is geared to stop the pass and the spread and the Q run. But this is the era where in 1988, the box was loaded. 3 linebackers, 4 down linemen every time, and maybe a safety. And Barry Sanders, 344 carries. You got a guess for the yards? Either one of you know?
I say about 200, 220.
No, not yards per game. Total yards. See, I Googled it because I wanted to be exact because I knew it was a stupid number. 26,028 yards in 11 games. 2,000. I said 26,000. I'm sorry. 2,600. 2,628 yards in 11 games. 37 touchdowns.
How? How?
Quarterback stats.
In 1988, with a loaded box. And he's not on the list. The list is jumping.
Man, he ran more yards than some quarterbacks throw.
Exactly.
Right.
Back then, in 1988, if you threw for 3,000 yards, you were breaking records. And he ran for 2,600. I don't know what that list is all about.
And did the same thing.
He ran for 600 yards behind and 9 touchdowns behind Thurman Thomas the year before. That was his only year as a starter.
God.
So he came in as a wrecking ball. That's crazy.
Yeah, y'all did mention Pepe, and speaking of him, he's supposed to join Eddie George as well.
He is. Yep.
Yeah, that shows you because like Pepe, he helped build up the running game in Marshall. Like you haven't seen a team like that at Marshall since Randy and Chad were there.
Yep,
right.
Leftwich.
Man, speaking
at least for me.
Speaking of Randy, how is it Randy on the list?
Man,
I just throw that list away, man. Throw it away.
That's what I'm saying, man. It's trash.
Look, I'm gonna throw it away. I'm gonna throw it away. I just don't want y'all to shoot the messenger because I had nothing to do with that list.
Listen,
I didn't. I saw that.
You guys might be a little young. You remember Rod Woodson at Iowa?
At Purdue.
Mm-hmm. At Purdue? How about Charles Woodson at Michigan? I mean, that list is garbage.
As much as I love Charles Woodson, we do not speak of him at Michigan. I'm just being honest. It's not because
I got a lot of heartburn saying that name, but you got to give the man his props. He's the monster.
Yeah,
I give him his props. It's just he was my favorite college player just because of what he could do on the field. But seeing him in that uniform, it just hurts. It just hurts. I'm sorry.
The good news is he's not a great broadcaster, so you could, we can all celebrate that.
But you know what? The fact that I didn't see him on that list and he's the only defensive Heisman Trophy winner still to this day.
Ever.
I don't know who made this list, but it's something wrong with them.
It was the most exciting players with the list was, right?
What is it?
I gotta say,
Top
Johnny
10 most.
Most
Manziel,
yeah, most
how do you
exciting
not have
college football players of all time.
Johnny Manziel had one good game. He beat Alabama. Big whoop. He was throwing jump balls to all-star wide receivers. How do you not have Vince Young over Johnny Manziel?
Exactly.
I
And
take
then you
that.
have another put Johnny Manziel on top of Lamar and
Lamar
Vince.
Jackson.
I'm like,
Oh my God.
that hurt me. That's the
Did,
first thing my brain went to.
did Johnny Manziel work at ESPN now? Did he put the list out?
Probably. I don't know. I 2 days ago. This is why I put that on the overlay. 2 days ago, I came across that list, and it was actually one of the younger players I had coached who had put it up, and I was like, wait. I get that this is your era, but you missed out on a lot of guys that should be
Ted
on this
Ginn.
list. And I
Ted Ginn.
sent him Charles Woodson. Ted. I sent him Charles Woodson's highlights. And he was like, well, who is this? I'm like, this is the guy who's the only defensive player to ever win the Heisman. And he's like, well, I never saw him. Like, you seeing him now. Why is he not on this list? He's like, I don't know. I just thought this is from my era. So I'm like, look, you need to go back and do your
Jabril
research.
Peppers. Jabril Peppers might have been the most
would've-
overhyped college football player of all time.
To be honest, if I'm gonna put a Michigan player up there, it's only two that I would put up there. One being Charles Woodson, the other one being Desmond Howard. Them the only two I would put up there.
Ooh, I don't know. Old Tishamanga almost went for 3,000.
Man, screw that guy. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I got on my old state shirt. That's the Buckeye in me talking. I apologize.
Oh, I get it.
Timmy, if you're watching, I apologize. It's
Timmy had one of the all-time greatest seasons. I mean, Kijana Carter is not on the list. And this list is garbage. Anyway.
Okay. Something just came across my ESPN ticker. And the Browns have signed a new player. Huka Lakanaka, Hakalaka Hikiniki Huka Lakapaka from the University of Hawaii. I couldn't help it.
Dude was clowning, man.
I couldn't help it, man. It's too good to pass up, man. If I'm gonna make a joke about it, this would be the episode to do it.
Hey, all that cap space they freed up recently,
Man, you know what? To be honest, real quick, because I know Stanley, you got a lot going on at home, but real quick, this off season for the Browns has made me very, very nervous as a Steelers fan. And I'm honestly not wanting the season to begin.
Man.
Because this makes I didn't think the Browns had this kind of gonads to go after people the way that they have so aggressively.
Yeah, they've added a couple pieces that might help. I'm not sure Clowney has any more left in the tank. He wasn't very effective for Seattle. But until one or two things has to happen, in my opinion, for the Browns to really get over the hump. One, you got to move on from Baker Mayfield. He's not the answer. Or two, you got to build your offense around a real star. See, whenever they try to make Baker Mayfield the star, they lose games. He's not the star of that offense. The star of the offense is the run game, and it's led by Nick Chubb. And when they lead that way, when they run the football first and then go into play action pass, it allows Baker to be more effective. But Baker doesn't have a big, strong arm. He's not fast and explosive. And he doesn't always make good decisions, particularly in the red zone. And he's got a lot to clean up for them to be a perennial powerhouse. Or they've got to try to move on. I really think they screwed up with a couple of these, veteran quarterbacks that were out there. I know they like Baker up there, but he doesn't do it for me. He throws for a lot of yards against bad defenses, and when they really need him, he doesn't show up. So I'm curious to see if he takes a step in the right direction. I agree with you. I think the Steelers are in trouble. But if he doesn't, then no, they're still going to be the same old Browns.
Man. Well, you've been in the league, so I cannot argue with you on that one, and I'm not going to argue with you on that one. my thing, because I don't know if you've seen my writings lately, but I had to write for the Browns all season. And from what I saw, my biggest issue with the Browns was defense. You at one point in the season, you led the league in takeaways, and now you were up in the top five for points off turnovers. But now, coming towards the end of the season, you suck at taking the ball away. You suck at points off turnovers. What I had a problem with the secondary. Believe it or not, they actually had a petition here in Cleveland to get rid of Andrew Sendejo. They had a petition. Smooth signed it. He actually signed it on air.
I did.
So
I sure did.
Do you think that them shoring up the secondary will help the offense some, or is it just Baker?
No, of course, it always helps to have a stellar defense, right? They get you more opportunities. They get you good field position. The secondary has to stay healthy. The problem with the secondary is it's been banged up, right?
Yes,
So if they can stay healthy back there, they'll be better. If Conley gives them anything, the bare minimum, he may at least take some pressure off the other end, who's a really good football player, right? So I agree with you. I do believe they made the right changes defensively. But remember, towards the end of the year, part of it, defense is on the field a lot longer too. You know, you look at any of the losses is because the offense and the decision making by your quarterback really hurt them. So now, Baker, you could always get better. If you're a pro and you want to be a pro, you can get better. And we'll see if he makes the steps in the right direction. If he does, then they'll be better for it. But if he doesn't, because he's arrogant Baker like he's always been, then they're going to still have some problems. And when I watch this run game, hey, it's the best run game in the NFL. It is. So why are they leading with that? Stop trying to make Baker Mayfield the star. Make him a game manager. Make him Trent Dilfer from Baltimore. Right. If you make him Trent Dilfer from Baltimore, you will compete for a Super Bowl. But you're sitting there trying to make him something he's not, and that's why you lose these important games. He's got to be a game manager, and he's got to know that he's a game manager. Trent Dilfer knew what his role was. He managed well all the way to a Super Bowl. Johnny, well, sometimes he acts like Johnny Manziel, but Baker thinks he's the show. He's not the show anymore. It's Nick Chubb.
I thought it was always Nick Chubb because just based off of him going for 1,000 yards in his rookie season, him sharing the load with Kareem Hunt, it was just he knew what the team needed, and I think that's a big quality to have in a leadership role. I don't know if anybody else agrees with that, but you always put the best interest of the team. You always put forward.
You should, but there have been moments the last 2 years where they're in the red zone and Nick Chubb's on the sideline.
I don't understand.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
That's the craziest thing. Your best player pretty much is not in the game when you need to get in the end zone. And then they bite super hard. Anytime that he gets a touch or thinks he's going to get a touch, they bite. And to your point, starting off with that and then trying to get that pass out there has worked really well. I see, too, another thing where with Chubb and what they're doing currently in terms of like the salary cap and what they're trying to do and all these moves they're making, here's a guy who doesn't have a fifth-year option. You need to extend that man. You need to extend him. Mm-hmm. You don't have a fifth year. War has a fifth year. Exactly. So War has a fifth year. Baker has a fifth-year option. They'll probably pick those up. Don't extend those guys yet. But Chubb, you need to extend that dude. I don't know what's going on. You free that money up, you need to just do it.
He's got to get his money now as a running back, so they've got to do it. And then they've got to figure out the wide receiver issue too. Like they don't have any explosiveness on the edge right now. They can talk all they want about Odell Beckham, but if he's healthy and you don't bring him back, where's your explosiveness? You got to have somebody that can take the top off of defense. They don't have it right now.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. Let me, because I just saw something. Somebody had a mock draft up, and it was interesting to me because they made it seem like this was a good idea. and I don't know if I saved it or not. I don't think I did, but let me see if I can find it. Oh, yeah, I did.
Now,
Mock draft for the Cleveland Browns. This was 7 rounds. Uh, for, going in order: Greg Newsome, which is cornerback from Northwestern; Peyton Turner, edge rusher from Houston; Aleem McNeil, D tackle from NC State; Kendrick Green, guard center from Illinois; Anthony Schwartz, wide receiver from Auburn; Cameron McGrone, linebacker from Michigan; Derek Forrest, defensive specialist from Cincinnati; Larry Borom, tackle guard from Missouri; and Nate Hobbs, cornerback from Illinois. The name that stuck out that was so interesting to me was, of course, Anthony Schwartz, who's wide receiver from Auburn. If you just picked up, who was it? Was it Higgins? They just Rashard Higgins that they
right.
re-signed. If you
Re-signed him,
have Higgins, you got Jarvis, you have Odell, and then you have 4 tight ends still on your roster. Why would you need to draft another wide receiver?
It tells you they're getting rid of somebody.
Well, you know that. We know that. But my thing
somebody
was
on the roster they're getting rid of. Look, before I get into that, let me say this. Here's the bigger problem that they have. This is why they can't win a damn thing. Because they're sitting here in the same state, one of the top football teams in the country, and yet only every 10 years do they draft a guy from Ohio State. It doesn't make any sense. It does not make it. They've had some opportunities to get some monsters from Ohio State, and they passed on them. And the last guy they got from Ohio State, when he's healthy, he's very good for them. And Ward, I don't understand that out of Cleveland. I don't get that. But anyway, I digress. I think if it pans out that way, it just tells you that, one of two things, and it concerns me. You're loading up with tight ends and wide receivers, tells me you want to throw the ball more. That concerns me because now you're getting away from really what makes you good. And that's playing great defense, and that's eating the clock with your run game. Or they just think they're going to get rid of some guys that aren't getting it done for them. So I think you'll find that out if they make that draft pick, and if they don't make any changes on the offensive end. They want to get more explosive over the top, and they want to be able to throw the ball more.
Well, like I said, mind you, that was somebody's mock draft. I don't think they're going in that direction. I think this is strictly a defensive draft. If an offensive player is there, I think they may pick him up. But primarily, to me, I think this is a defensive draft for the Browns. I just feel like, Stanley, you're right. They need to go back to the run game. That's what makes them better. You have the best running back duo in the league in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And to be honest, I honestly believe if you stick with that, you actually beat the Chiefs in the playoff game. Because let's be honest, if you watch that game, and if you watch the Chiefs all season, that run defense was very suspect against teams who actually knew how to run the ball.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And they brought Chad Henne in the game. They had no explosiveness on offense.
And you lost. That dude was still in the league.
I forget. Right. I didn't know he was still playing. And I'm like, wow, here we go with this,
man. Yeah, I mean, it's just, we'll see what happens with the Browns. I have grown to sort of like them a little. I'm from Jersey, so I never really thought about the Browns much, but I've been in Ohio long enough. But nah, you fooled me once, shame on you. You fooled me twice, shame on me. The Browns have been clowns for too long for me to believe in anything they do. And I got to tell you, I'll never get over Baker Mayfield. The way you feel about some of the Michigan guys, you'll never get me to say too much positive about Baker Mayfield. Not going to happen.
That's Michigan, though. Them the Michigan guys, man.
Yeah,
you of all people should know that hatred.
None of them dudes was cowardly to wait till the team went inside to go plant his flag in the middle of the horseshoe after the team went in. Number two, if you felt like Ohio State disrespected you in Oklahoma, why you ain't do something about it on the field at Oklahoma?
That's true. That's true.
Number three,
Now, since you brought
if he was
that
a
up,
black quarterback, he would have got away from the cops he ran from, and it would have dropped his draft status by 15 spots.
Yep.
He not
hey,
fast enough
since
to
you
run from
brought,
cops. How he running from D line?
I got nothing on that. But since you brought that up, how would you guys have received or taken that, knowing y'all got a home and home with Oklahoma or whoever it was back then? How would you guys have handled that on the field?
Well, the home and home, remember, we're Oklahoma first, and then he came to Ohio State second. So he waited till the whole team went in, and then he did it. You know, they won that game. They're out there celebrating. He didn't do that while Ohio State was still on the field. Trust me, Meyer, you did that when we were on the field, you got some real problems. You better have everybody out there with you. And your travel group isn't as big as your at-home group, so they would have some problems.
Ooh.
But, you know, he did. I'm not a fan. I try to like him because every now and then he looks like he's competent, but he's too arrogant for me. I don't like that nonsense. So we'll see.
No.
The Browns' fate is in his hands. If they want him to be the star, if they want him to have the billboards around town, and they're not going to have the outcomes that they want.
That's very true. That's very true.
Mm-hmm.
All right, to end it on a good note, we got some scores. Indians beat the Reds. What was it 6-3 today?
Mm-hmm.
The Columbus Crew, the Columbus Crew tie in the draw with Philadelphia in the kickoff of MLS is a 0-0 tie, so nobody wins in that one. Shout out to Coach Hector Marinero and John Carroll for winning the OAC Men's Soccer Championship. They three-peat this year. So it's the third championship. And unfortunately, there's no big tournament in soccer this year. So we got to wait till the fall to see how they handle it. But shout out to Coach Hector and, you know, everything that he's done. Great guy. You know, couldn't ask for a better coach for those who like soccer and pay attention. Finally, there's a shakeup going on in UEFA, man. I don't know what's really going on, but from what I'm hearing, it's a super league that's about to start up. And a couple teams have confirmed it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what it means for like teams like Manchester United and all of that, but if this super league happens, what is that going to do for the World Cup?
Bro, listen. Well, this is what I'll tell you about that, because the teams they were talking about, the fact that you got Real Madrid, Manchester United, Liverpool, Juventus, like it's about to get real. First of all, you make Messi earn his money. Let's talk about that. We already said what that dude is making. It's crazy.
Man, that's not
crazy.
fair. That's so not fair.
That's just the craziest thing I ever heard. So let's start with that. Secondly, what I think it does for you is it makes the what do you call it? The like their transfers and whatnot. It makes that pretty interesting. And then also I think it shakes it up a little bit in terms of what your premier powerhouses are versus the ones that used to be. I think it brings them back up into the forefront because they have more money to work with. So you figure, man, you kind of fell off a little bit, you know, last few years. I think this helps bring them back. And then you got teams like Real Madrid, who's always been there. You know, I think it just makes them even better. And in terms of the coverage, I mean, you're talking, it's just making Europe like be on blast right now in terms of like their exposure they're going to get, just being like, you know, pandemic and all of that. People are thirsty for it. They want it to happen. There's teams that they felt like would never play each other that will play each other finally, not just a friendly. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah,
I'm excited
that
about
would be
it.
interesting.
That's the thing, man. Like, who knows? I mean, Man U going up against like, you know, Real Madrid or some other teams that we had mentioned, didn't even see that ever coming. I mean, you have a friendly once in a while, once every 10, 15 years, they may touch each other or something like that. But this is cool, man. I'm all for that, you know.
And you know what? I was thinking about this, but I didn't think it would ever happen because
Mm-hmm.
in soccer in Europe is way too much money. Way too much money.
It's a lot.
As we've seen with Messi's contract, there's way too much fucking money in it.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, Stanley, just to bring you up to speed, Messi's contract
Yeah, I know.
is
It's ridiculous, and they talk about it. I saw it, but my thing is, I feel like we went. I feel like we went from talking English to speaking Spanish all of a sudden. I have no clue what you dudes are talking about, and I don't want to
no.
know what
We
you
were
dudes
gonna
are talking about. Talk about soccer. You can have that sport. I've tried that with my
come
daughter.
on,
That
man.
ain't for me. That's not for me.
That's a
Yeah,
great that's a great that's a great sport, man. You can make a lot of money in that, as we've seen.
I know.
But we had to touch that news because
That's a big
with
deal. I'm joking. That is a big deal. That's a lot of money. But you ever see the trades in
yeah,
soccer? The trades are the
yes,
greatest in soccer because they're, all
Yes.
this money, a player, a goat and a 6-pack of beer.
you getting
It's,
incentives
it's crazy what they
all the
throw
way
into those
around.
trades.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to understand. Well, I'm not saying you, but collective for the people watching. You have to understand in soccer, like baseball, there's no salary cap for real. There's no
Right.
designated how much you can pay a player or how much you have to pay a player as it is in basketball, football, hockey. So, especially in Europe, which is why a lot of American players, a lot of Spanish players, Japanese, Middle Eastern, African, they're in Europe because the money is there.
Mm-hmm.
And with this Super League, I can only imagine what that's going to look like now that you're talking about building a Super League with the power teams and the traditionally popular teams. This is gonna be
Mm-hmm.
crazy.
And you know what else, Mel? It makes the youth development piece of that way more competitive than it's
Oh
ever
man,
been.
forgot about
Because you're
that.
talking about
I
these
forgot
like
about
10 to 16-year-old kids coming up through these programs, right? Getting scouted, building them up. They going pro at 16, and what that does, man, I mean, it creates a special environment to where
that. Right.
it rivals, what we see in like our AAU sports.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Because this right
That's gonna
here,
be crazy.
this is going to be, it already was right here. You know what I'm saying? But what this does is it just takes it to another level. You got kids like, I'm not sure how they do it over there in terms of like how they negotiate that, if it's something that, they kind of sign with the parents and like whoever their guardian or custodian, however they want to, go about the legal terms. But like doing that and then saying, okay, well, we see that now Juventus is over here, or we see that FC Barcelona is over here. Maybe I want to jump over there. Maybe they pay for my housing and my move and all that other stuff because the rules different, you know. So
Hmm.
I don't know, man. This is about to be crazy. This is about to be crazy.
Yeah,
And
it
I think
is.
what it does too is I wonder what it does, like if it makes the league so big or makes it so much of an expansion to the point where does it do something to the MLS or these other leagues around the world and kind of like pushes them back down to where they were previously before they started to build themselves up again? Because you figure MLS right now is a lot bigger than it's ever been, but it's not going to be on that level of what they are over there, obviously. But at the same time, I wonder if it pushes it back down to where it was like 10, 20 years ago.
Here's my theory with that. Here and I'm gonna put this in a global perspective. It's no secret we suck when it comes to the World Cup on the men's side. It's no secret. We get blew out, we get dog walked every year. The U.S. men's team. Hate to say it, but it's true. I think what this Super League does or will do is push the U.S. to get these leagues, these soccer leagues, and these youth development leagues to push them to be better, so we can compete with Europe.
And you know what they need
I,
to do?
I don't know if I agree with your assessment because it has nothing to
Well,
do. It has nothing to do with the efforts. There's great efforts going in right now to youth soccer in America. There's a lot of money pouring into it. Hey, look, the Columbus Crew just built their second soccer-only stadium. Here's the
yeah,
problem. Here's what has to change. The best athletes in the country have to see it as a lucrative move without having to get on a plane and go to another country. Right now, in order to make the money that you make in baseball or basketball or football, you got to get on a plane and be a star in another country. Well, these kids want to be stars in America. So when you go to Patterson, New Jersey, when you go to Cleveland, Ohio, and you see them dudes that's fast that can run and jump, could you imagine LeBron James in a goalie net?
Oh man.
So,
we saw him in a football uniform. That was bad enough.
Right. I mean, do we have the athletes? Of course we have the athletes. Gary Barry was a hell of a soccer player, but he went to Ohio State on a football scholarship. Oh yeah, he was in the crew program and everything, but he went to Ohio State on a football scholarship because that's where the money was. So, unless the MLS can figure out how to get paydays, you're not going to see the kids moving that way. The suburban kids are moving that way because the suburban mom has been, bamboozled into believing that football leads to concussions. But kids are flocking more to basketball and baseball and stuff. Until you can get a big payday to the American kid that is the best athlete here in this country, then you're never going to see a move with the athletes, and you'll never see the money go.
I agree with that.
It's the girls' basketball argument. Are they skilled? Are they really good? Is it fun to watch sometimes? Yeah, but how many people tune in? So, can they have the same amenities that the boys have at the NCAA? Probably not, because they don't make the same revenue. That's your challenge.
I don't even want to touch that subject, but I agree. I do agree with the money. Having paydays in soccer here in the U.S. would mean a lot. I just feel like, to me, if you take notice to that, it would give you the idea maybe we need to start paying these guys a little more, or maybe we need to find a bigger TV deal so we can pay these guys more.
They can't pay them more. Again, it's back to my girls' basketball argument. It's back to women's soccer. Women's soccer, right? You just said it. Our women's soccer, they're phenomenal. The United States, they smoke cats. They get in the battle of Canada every now and then, but they're very good, right? Our men's soccer get paid more than them. Why? Nobody really watches soccer in this country, let's be honest, but more people watch men. So how are you gonna get Fox Sports, ESPN, ABC Sports to write you a fat check for soccer league when they're gonna look at you and say nobody watches?
Yeah,
that's your challenge. So my question is, how do you convince Americans to watch soccer? That's what they got to figure out. That's what they have to figure out. And if they can figure that out, then the TV revenues will come, because then they can fill their stadiums and then people will love it. But it's hard to sit there and watch a sport that every 15 minutes you might get a goal. That's the most anxiety-ridden sport in the history of man. You sit there for 90 minutes for one goal?
That's the excitement.
Listen, look at the NBA. I get into argument with my boys all the time because they talk about the NBA scoring. So 12 years ago, there was one 28-point scorer a game in the NBA. Now there's 25 of these dudes. Why? Because they changed all the rules about defense. They spread the game out. There's not two bodies in a paint. And now they're shooting from every place. You can get to the rim easier than ever. Why? The NBA wanted that. What did baseball do? They did something to the bats and to the baseballs. They made these parks smaller. They want home runs. What did the NFL do? You better stop hitting my quarterback because we need more points. Every sport in America has geared up and put the offense on steroids. Soccer is the same as it was 100 years ago. You got to even hockey. What did hockey do? What does hockey do in overtime now? They go to this 3-man shootout because it speeds it up. They got you got to make some changes. I know the purists will hate that. It's like baseball purists. But if you don't make some changes to make the game more exciting, you think a TikTok generation all of a sudden is going to watch soccer? They're not.
Hey,
definitely
got a point there.
And that's the hard part about it too. And to your point, with the girls basketball thing, that's the reason why the women's team is so good in the U.S. because nobody wants to see the females play overseas. So they come here. And it's a whole plethora of talent. to come to the U.S. to play soccer on the female side.
Well, and it's women sports in general.
Oh yeah,
are dominated by the United States. We just got some monster athletes. We do. And because of it, they're the best in the world, even basketball. But there are challenges like any other business. And the problem is whenever you think about a sport, people, it's just like people the way they think about hospitals. They think it's like a public utility. It's not. Sport is not public utility. It's a business. You got to figure out how to make your business more exciting. So who's the lady that's on TNT with Shaq and them? She's phenomenal. She's a great basketball player. You guys know. She dunked when she was in high school and stuff like that. The name will come to me. Anyway, Shaq says, well, we need to lower the rim in women's basketball. She just blows up on him. She goes off. She's a purist. So I'm like, no, you need to lower the rim in women's basketball. You need to see more dunks. It needs to be exciting so more people will be willing to watch you. That's the bottom line. Why do you think the UFC blew up so fast? People want to see explosive punches in the face. So women's basketball, you got to make a change or you're going to get the same outcome. This is not a sexist argument. This is a business argument. If you don't make the changes, your outcomes are going to be the same and you're not going to have the revenue that supports you getting paid. It's a simple equation. Supply and demand.
Gotta give people what they want.
That's it.
Yeah.
With that, gentlemen, I got to get to the family. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you very much for being on.
Great having you back.
Always welcome back.
Yeah, just let me know. I love doing the show with you guys. It's fun.
I appreciate it so much.
Same
Actually,
here,
on that note, we'd like to thank Stanley for being on the show tonight. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, Instagram, subscribe to us on YouTube. We got some more big news coming up. As welcome. Stanley's always welcome. Don't forget to check us out on Cleveland Sports Talk. Over there, I am still writing. We busy, man. We busy. So just keep up with us, man. A lot of things is happening. As you just see, we had Stanley Jackson on giving us some insight in the Big Ten, the world of sports in general. Just keep an eye on us. So with that being said, for 4th and 15, I'm Mel, that's Smooth. Peace.